Hey there, pre-AP. Let's have a short video on Kingdom Protista. So, Kingdom Protista is, I like to call this the funky monkey of the kingdoms. This is a funky monkey. I also like to say that this is the, I don't know how to spell miscellaneous. I'm just going to be honest. We're just going to try. If it's wrong, it's okay, you know what I mean. This is the miscellaneous kingdom. These are organisms that don't fit into any other kingdom. They just don't. They're not an animal. They're not a plant. They're not a fungi. They're not a bacteria. They can be like an animal or be like and behave like a plant or a fungi, but they're not made of the same structures. They don't have the same... They're kind of like them, but they're not. You know how whenever sometimes you go and get something at the store, maybe it's an off-brand cinnamon roll, and you really love the Pillsbury cinnamon rolls, and those are your favorite, and you know exactly how they taste. And then you see that the off-brand cinnamon rolls are just a little bit cheaper, and they're probably the same size can as the Pillsbury, and you go home and you bake the cinnamon rolls, and then you eat them, and then you just think, this is kind of like the Pillsbury cinnamon roll, but it's not. It doesn't taste like the Pillsbury cinnamon roll. It doesn't really look like it either. The icing's not as thick. That's what Protist is like. They can kind of behave like an animal or kind of behave like a plant or a fungi, but whenever it comes down to it, they're just not like them at all. Enough to be classified in that category. So if you're a protist, you're a part of Kingdom Protista. You obtain your food one of two ways. You're either a heterotroph, so make sure you underline this. And remember, being a heterotroph means that you eat other organisms. If you're a heterotrophic protist, we say that you are animal-like. So go ahead and highlight that. These are animal-like protists. They behave like an animal. They eat other things. They eat little bitty microscopic things in the water. And examples would be things like protozoa and zooplankton. These are teeny tiny fellas that live in the water and they eat microscopic little food. Now, if you're not a heterotroph, that means that you're going to be a photoautotroph. Now, before you get all, what? This means that they're a photosynthesizer. Photo, remember, means that they go through photosynthesis. This is how they get their food. And then autotrophic, remember, if you want to make yourself these notes, this is a self-feeder. Hey, how do things self-feed? Whoa, photosynthesis. Most of these guys, make yourself a highlighted note that these are algae and phytoplankton. These guys are green. This is how you know if they are a photosynthesizer. They are green. Look at this little fella. This guy's called a euglena. And see all the cute little green inside of him? Yeah. He gets to photosynthesize. This little red dot right here, it's now blue, but that's his eye. He has a flagella, you can't really see it, that helps him move around. He's cute. He lives in the water. Most protists live in the water. That's where they like to hang out. So you're either a heterotroph, a photoautotroph, or... they didn't put a slide about that. Or you're a mixotroph. That is true. There are things called mixotrophs. And just know that mixotrophs, you can obtain energy. You get energy from food. Either way. You can swap it up. You'd be like, today they're kind of like an omnivore. Today I would like to go eat another organism. I can go do that. Or, I'm too lazy. I'm just going to stay here in the sunshine, photosynthesize, hang out. So that's about feeding. The next thing is about movement. So, most of these are motile. The big thing that they're going to move with is flagella. Flagella, put yourself a note out there. to the side somewhere that flagella is like a tail. And we're going to draw one. And then you have this other stuff called cilia. Now cilia is a little bit different. These are, I like to call them small fuzzies. They're small fuzzies. We're going to draw a flagella and a cilia really quickly. So let's pretend like this is our little Protist guy. This is his flagella. It is a whip-like tail that extends outward. There's his eyeball. Now, if you're a cilia, that means that most of them are kind of oblong shape. You have little fuzzies. You have little bitty. Kind of looks like you dropped a sucker in the carpet. And then you picked it up and it's got all that fuzz on it. That's what it looks like. That's cilia. That's it. So, little fuzzies. There's his eyeball. Most of them don't have eyeballs, but he just looks cute with an eyeball, so I drew it. So, this is flagella. And this guy's cilia. So, they both are used for movement. And that's all I'm going to ask you about it. I'm not going to ask you all the other funky stuff. Alright, movement with cilia. There it is. Look. This guy is called a paramecium. Parameciums like to live in the water. They have, right here, he's spitting out some extra water so that he doesn't drown or burst. And he is covered with cilia. See all the little cute fuzzies? He does. He looks like a sucker that has been dropped in the carpet. You picked him up and he's all fuzzy. If you look at this microscope picture, you can barely see it. It makes the picture look really grainy, but it's not. It's cilia. It's used for movement. And then they talk about Lynn Margulies another time. We talked about her in the first unit. All you need to know is look at big letter B. Underline where it says small prokaryotes enter into a symbiotic relationship with larger prokaryotes. That's it. Then go down to big letter C. You just need to know that those are the things like the mitochondria, the chloroplast, and the flagella. We just got to bring that up one more time. And then we're moving on to big examples. So remember, these are just things that they said, hey, the mitochondria and the chloroplast hung out with another cell for a long time, and they were like, hey, I never want to leave. I want to be best friends forever. So I'm just going to literally move inside your cell and just hang out forever. So, here we go to the good stuff, the examples. So, we can actually draw these too. Alright, so a euglenozoa, or just a euglena, as I like to call it for short. If you want to draw you one out beside there, you can. If you don't want to, well, then, you're just a fuddy-duddy. So this is a euglena. And we need to know that it is biflagellate organism. All that means is it has two flagellas. It can move really fast because it has two flagellas. In this picture, one flagella is probably sitting on top of the other one, and you cannot see it. We also need to know, and underline please, that these organisms are mixotrophic. Whoa, there's that funky word again. All that means is it can photosynthesize, make its own food, or be heterotrophic, depending on what they feel like eating that day. And the big thing about them is they have a red eye spot that helps them detect light. And if they need to photosynthesize that day, maybe, there aren't any good snacks to eat that day, or, well, maybe the food source is limited. Things like that happen. They can take this little eye spot. You look at this picture. We're probably going to draw these tomorrow. And they can find where the light is. They did an experiment on this where they shone a light over here. And then, well, first they put the euglena in a completely dark space and it didn't move. They put the light over here and the euglena went over here. Well, then they turned the light off. And then the Euglena sat in the dark. Well, then they decided, well, we're going to trick him, turn the light over here. And then he went over here. Because of this eye spot, it can detect light like our eyes can, and it could go make food that day if he wants to be a photosynthesizer. So Euglenas under a microscope, they're really bright, pretty green. You can see their flagellas. They look like those really thin, wispy tails. Alright, so alveolata. It looks like something off of a sci-fi movie. It really does. Alveolata, please highlight that these organisms contain small, air-filled chambers called alveoli. And as you can see in this picture, you can see those teeny tiny holes. This was taken with probably an electron microscope because of the really pretty details in the picture. We need to know that these are dinoflagellates, which means, whoa, we have a lot of flagella. We have a lot of tails. We can move really well. And these are phytoplankton. Why we talk about phytoplankton is because of red tide. And anytime that these organisms move in a mass amount, now most of the time you're going to find these in the ocean. And let's see if there's a picture. Yeah, red tide. Red tide, it actually looks like a lot of organisms, like something like a whale died. And there's the whale's blood, in the ocean. But it's not. These are these alveolatas, these phytoplankton. And it looks like the water is turning red, but it's not. It's just full of these little organisms. And what these organisms do, they're very toxic to things like clams, which are mollusks, fish, and humans if you get caught out in this. And it actually kills a lot of fish and a lot of mollusks every year. So what this will do is it will just filtrate through the water and it will eventually end up on the beach. And then, you got to clean it up somehow. How they clean it up, I have no idea. But that would take a lot of work. Alright, diatoms. All we need to know is they produce a yellow-brown, energy-rich oil. Ooh, interesting. They're these cute, that looks like a really pretty wallpaper to me. Or it could be, a pattern on some type of clothing garment. Someone should make a diatom pattern. Make a shirt for me. And then they also have a very strong outer shell composed of silica. And what it means is they look like stained glass. That's what you're seeing. Whenever you put it under the microscope, it looks like a pretty stained glass picture. And they are a very important phytoplankton because, well, they're in the food chain. And they're a major producer. A lot of things like to eat diatoms. And if you took diatoms out of the food chain, then something would lose its food source, and then they would die, and then something that eats on it would die, and then we'd have a major problem. So, yay for diatoms. Alright, so, those are not seagulls in that picture. That is not a bunch of penguins in that picture. That is brown algae. These are called Phelophyta. Say that 3 times fast. Pheophyta, Phytophyta, Phytophyta. So these are multicellular brown algae. That's our big example. And pretty much you're going to find this. This is seaweed or kelp, pretty much. It's an algae. It's not a plant. And it produces a brown, light-absorbing pigment that contains iodine. If you look at iodine in a bottle, it's actually this brown kind of substance. Well, this is why it's brown. It contains the element iodine. So this is kelp on the forest. Or actually, if kelp grow in one area, they grow really, really thick patches and they call them forests. And you can find these in many oceans. It looks like it's a plant. everybody thinks that kelp and seaweed are plants. They're not. They're algae. So the next time you eat sushi, just think, whoa, I'm eating a protist, guys. This is cool. Freak somebody out at dinner. Alright, so, and then we have animal-like protists. These are probably my favorite ones. This is one of my favorite ones, an amoeba. We've been watching the Amoeba Sisters. This is what a real amoeba looks like. It looks like a splat hand that was thrown on the wall. And what they are, let's underline or highlight that these use pseudopods to move. Pseudopods are these little bitty arm-like structures that are sticking out. Those are not there on accident. What those do is if there's a piece of food out here, these pseudopods, or literally translated false feet, come and wrap. It gives the food the bear hug of death. They'll come out here and wrap its arms around the food like, hey, little food, hadn't seen you in a while. I ate your cousin last week. That was on accident. Don't get mad. And then they will wrap and close their pseudopods and send the food inside here and go and eat the food. The food has no idea it has been eaten until it gets inside the amoeba. It's a bad way to go. We're going to watch an amoeba eat a paramecium tomorrow. You're going to feel bad for the paramecium, but at the same time, you're going to be saying, whoa, that's really cool. So literally, they catch and eat other organisms just like animals. That's what amoebas do. And then, there's the amoebas. Most are free living organisms. And like we said, you know, this guy doesn't really have a shape. He just looks like a splat hand. He's just hanging out. And then, fungus-like protist. So there's an amoeba feeding on something real quick. See how it wraps its pseudopod arms around it? That's actually eating a paramecium right there. He looks like he's going in for the attack, and then he gets lunch. Alright, so these are, right here, these are fungus-like protists. They behave like a fungus. They kind of look like a fungus, but they're not a fungus. They're not. They're a protist. So, these feed on dead, decaying matter. They are decomposers. Well, so are fungi, but they're not made up of the same type of cells that fungi are. We call these mycetozoa. Myceta means fungus-like, and zoa means protist. So, fungus-like protist. And they love to grow on rotting, dead things, just like in this picture, this rotting log. And then our last one, these are plant-like protists. They behave like a plant, and you just need to know that they perform photosynthesis like a plant. These are green algae. So go ahead and give yourself that as your example. Just write it down, green algae. Alright, so that's it for protozoa. That's it for protists. We'll watch some videos on it tomorrow. We'll probably draw some. And then let's move on to fungi. Hope that was helpful.